And as I have some of the copies here, every 2 years we change the team of editors. They're coming from many different countries, and most of the theoretical participation is also focusing on how could we research the curatorial models. And here one of the latest is about collective curating, one of the items in which Manifesta became quite famous. What we also do a lot is organizing coffee breaks. Coffee Break is an initiative of Hans-Ulrich Obrist, one of the first Manifesta curators, and he said, I hate conferences because the real business is done in the tea break and the coffee break. The real networking is done in the coffee break and the tea break. Whether it's a tea break or a coffee break, people sit together, they drink a cup of coffee, they talk about important things, and they are really setting together to make a new initiative of working. So we are not organizing conferences, but we are organizing coffee breaks, in which also the coffee break itself is a tool to give people access to international specialists. So coffee breaks are organized in Liverpool or in London or in Murcia, where we were, and it's a 2 days sitting, drinking, talking, working together with the aim of setting up a new network. As you see here, we have an archive in Amsterdam. The archive is traveling with the Biennale itself. So if we go to one place, like in Murcia or in Limburg, part of the archive is traveling to the cities where the Biennale take place. And also it is a tool to do research on the long term. All the material of the Biennales, which were set up in the different host cities, come back together in Amsterdam, and from Amsterdam they travel forward. We also publish books. There's one book especially I think I could mention in here. It might be possible to send some copies. The Manifesta Decade. It's an investigation done in 2003 by two writers, Barbara van der Linde and Elena Filipovic, about how did the post-war situation in Europe was shaping its new artistic boundaries. And especially it was focused on what role Manifesta played in it. What I like very much about the book is the criticality towards Manifesta. Because some people say, it is very difficult to judge yourself. So what we did in the book is investigate with 200 international art critics, did Manifesta really achieve what it promised? And if it doesn't and didn't, how can we achieve this? There is now a new book upcoming which is dealing with the history of exhibition making in Manifesta Biennales itself. Since we are facing our next decade, the Manifesta 10, we would like to investigate how also the methodology of exhibition making have been changed from the 90s till now. I would like to go a little bit about what is this Manifesta Biennial, where did it go from? In Manifesta 1 was in Rotterdam. That's the city where we started. It was very difficult to find one of the first Biennale places because we're working with host regions and host cities who are actually creating the infrastructure for the biennial to come. And this Manifesta was a lot about, it was a team of 5 curators coming from East and West, and they investigated the status of contemporary art in 11 venues along one street in Rotterdam. And there were more than 130 artists working together, of which most of the work was invisible. And I remember it was a very ephemeral Manifesta, which was very much criticized at that moment. And I remember that the mayor of Rotterdam was opening this biennial and he said, there are 150 artists and there's not one painting on the wall. Nothing is visible here. And this is maybe showing also the experimental character. Many people were criticizing Manifesta that it was a very deliberately anarchistic, experimental way to deal with contemporary art. And later, 10 years later, it was judged as one of the first exhibition where a work in progress, a work in process was realized. This is also why we're always facing a little bit the outskirts of curatorial practices, which also means that we need to take the lead in certain new methodologies, which also means that you are criticized a lot. And this happened in many of the Manifesta. Manifesta 2 took place in Luxembourg. 3 curators. They did so many, this was one of the Manifesta biennials which really very much was working on the network. They established a series of meetings in East and Western Europe in which they wanted to rewrite European art history. And the books published in this Manifesta was also really dealing with how can other people, besides the Manifesta curators, find their way in Eastern Europe. And the catalogue was consisting of a source book in which every institution in Central and Eastern Europe was asked to write its history, to come with contact persons, to allocate addresses, etc. And we heard that this book was very much received also by other curators as a source book. So this was a very practical way of opening up the region, opening up the network. In Manifesta 2, there was also this super large library archive of the Soros networks displayed in one of the museums, in which many of the visitors in Luxembourg used this information to start their own research. Manifesta 3 was in Ljubljana. Here you come to a very weak issue in which we were dealing a lot with the fact that although we tried many times to host a Manifesta in Eastern Europe, it was very difficult for us to really realize this. There were many different reasons. One of the reasons was, of course, also the lack of infrastructure in the 90s, but sometimes also the lack of trust, to trust this European biennial, this experimental model, to use the resources. In Ljubljana, Igor Sabel and myself, we worked there for 2 years with a very interesting team of curators, Francesco Bonami, Ole Baumann, an architectural specialist, Katrin Romberg, who recently did the Berlin Biennale, and Maria Lavajova from Bratislava. And it was mostly like the first Manifesta Biennale, which was completely spread around the city. It was not a biennale which only took place in the institutions, but it was characterized by works in situ in the city itself. I remember a fantastic work of Alterazione video inside the woods around the city of Ljubljana. It's also one of those manifestas which was dealt with a theme, because most of the time the themes were not regular in the manifesta. This was borderline syndrome. And it was created by the curatorial team to interact especially about the position of Ljubljana in the international art field. Because for Western curators and artists, Ljubljana is East. But for many East European curators and artists, Ljubljana is perceived as a very Western source. And it was a kind of, this manifesto was an action how to proactively enforce, empower artists. So one of the actions I remember of the curatorial team is, don't ask us what we can do for you, but tell us what you can do for us.